Hello everyone, this is Serious Trivia, and welcome back to another dive diary of our multiplayer balance mod, as today we'll be taking a look at all the changes for the Strategist class. To get started, we'll first look at the design philosophy behind the class. And as stated here, Strategists are supportive generals that provide buffs and debuffs to aid their armies. They are designed to be the weakest class in terms of individual power level, as they must rely on their fellow generals and troops to keep them safe. But at the same time, they must remain close to combat to be effective, as their abilities have limited range. And looking at the baseline stats, we have the tier 3 cost at 900, which is a lot cheaper for most of the DLC characters, which is still defaulted to 1500, but for some of the launch game characters, the price will go up from their sub 700 level, which is a bit too cheap. Now this is the average tier 3 cost. There will be some generals deemed a bit weaker, so you might see a 600 base. There might be some deemed stronger at 1200. And as always, Unbreakable is going to carry a 600 extra cost, which will be increased onto this base average value. For weapons, they will all get Celestial Sword. Horses will be Black Elites. Morale will be set at 42, which is pretty much the morale of almost every single strategist in the game right now. Hit point will be set to 20k, which means a couple of the double health characters will actually drop to 20k, because it seems quite arbitrary for some of the base launch characters who were deemed a bit closer to Sentinels ended up with 40k health. This will add more consistency to strategists as a whole. Base charge will be set to 26, and base attack speed will be 0%. Now, currently, most strategists actually have a minus 50% base attack speed. They have half the attack speed of the regular weapons. That's a really unnecessary debuff for them, so I think it's just going to shift to 0% here. Then for melee evasion, 16 points would be the default value. Some will be higher because of their armor stats, as well as other bonuses on their character. That we will not change. And for default abilities, we have the Wisdom of the River, Stifling Deluge, and Inspiring Surge, and all three abilities are fine as it is. They have clear defined uses, and all three are actually quite strong if used properly, as Wisdom River can turn the tide with units and generals in fights, with 30-second duration of minus 100% melee evasion and armor. Stifling Deluge helps shut down nearby enemy general's ability usage, and Inspiring Surge speeds up your own general's ability usage. So both are quite useful for battle, and also forces you to keep your strategists closer to your other generals, which is part of their design philosophy as well. And looking at individual character changes, starting with Chen Gong here, the cost will go down from 1500 to 900 here. Horse will be changed to Black Elite, and his unique ability, Analyze Weakness, will have its general condition removed, which means this debuff of 20% melee evasion and armor will be applied to nearby generals and units, which will make Chen Gong a bit more useful, while forcing him to remain close to the action at the same time, which kind of plays into our design philosophy here. Then looking at Diao Chan, we are changing the cost from 1500 to 900. Sovereign of the Blade changes to Celestial Sword, Horse goes from White Elite to Black Elite, and the base attack rate is improved from minus 50% to 0%. Then for her unique ability, Heavenly Grace, it's quite iconic and definitely very strong. It's one use only. You freeze all nearby enemies, including generals, and you also apply a minus 100% melee evasion armor debuff on them. It only lasts 15 seconds and have a 35 meter range, which I think it's required to keep it balanced, since it is very, very strong in terms of freezing the enemy general, reducing all their defensive bonuses, leaving them vulnerable to attacks from your other generals. Then for Fa Zheng, his tier 3 cost is going to go from 1815 to 1200 because he's on the strong side with his mock ability. Then base charge bonus goes from 181 to 26 because he used to be a Vanguard, I believe. Armor is going to go up from 11 to 20. Now, for most of the previous armor stats in the game for other classes, I kept them whatever the default value were in the game. But for strategists and some commanders where their armor is clearly a robe, I decided that 20 is just a good default value to fall back on. Some are slightly higher, some are slightly lower. You see all sorts of numbers from 11, 15, 18. And just to keep things consistent, we're just going to use a nice rounded 20 here. And of course, Fa Zheng's unique ability is Mock. very strong, unavoidable damage over 60 seconds. There's a decent cooldown on it, and the range is not that far, forcing you to get into the action, so no need to really change this ability. Previously, he was banned for this, and after testing him out in our Season 2 tournament, I think it's fine to let Fadrun keep this ability as it stands. Then moving on to Guo Jia, we have a cost increase from his ridiculously low 675 to 900. Attack rate shifts back to 0%. Armor goes up to 20. Foresight is his unique ability. This is going to be the blueprint for all vision abilities going forward. So you'll see a lot of variations of this ability. And I'm going to change all of them to Foresight because there's really no need to have other variations of a very similar ability, especially ones that are active abilities for only 3 minutes. I feel like it's quite unfair. So all of them are just going to get Foresight in the future. Then moving on to Jia Xu, we have a cost increase from 825 to 900. Not really a major change. 0% attack rate, 20 points for armor. Hidden Strike is actually quite good. You do have to put yourself in danger, but you can sneak some decent damage, and it also gives you stock when you activate it. So it's quite interesting. There's a debuff on it of minus 50% speed, minus 50% armor, which has value as well. Then moving forth to Rong, we just have a cost shift from 645, which is too cheap, to 900. Attack rate goes back to 0% and nothing else needs to be changed here. And then we have Lady Zhen, who comes in super broken as a character in the last DLC. 1815 for one of the worst characters in custom battle. Goes back down to 900. Her morale is 40. She's the only strategist with 40, going up to 42. Health somehow is at 9k at tier 3, now going to be at 20k. Base charge was for a Vanguard of 181, going down to 26. Base evasion was 0, going back up to 16. And armor goes up to 20. So there's a lot of buff to her just by fixing her as a consistent strategist in the game. And the cost of 900 is a reflection of these stat modifying back to default, as well as the fact that she possesses all 3 default abilities and a nice roster of units from Yuan Shao, since she is part of that last DLC in Fates Divided. Then moving on to Li Ru, we have a cost decrease from 1500 to 900. Heavenly Sword becomes Celestial Sword. Health goes down from 40k to 20k as I want to remove all the 40k strategists. Base charge goes to 26. Armor goes up to 20. And most interesting is the Hold Firm passive buff, which will now shift to 1 second, 2 second, 3 second, 4 second structure to make it actually viable. And it's actually going to make Liu quite strong in terms of being a fighter, since he can achieve additional 100% melee evasion quite easily with 10 seconds of combat, which still means he has 4% hit rate and 20k health to work with. Weapon's not super great, so he's not going to become broken or anything, but just much more useful. Then moving on to Liu Yan, cost decrease from 1815 to 900, because apparently all the strategists added in from Fates Divided got 1815 for some reason. And the charge bonus goes from Vanguard 181 to 26, armor goes from 14 to 20. Rally the Troop as a unique ability is quite nice. You get a nice 60-second cooldown ability that gives 10 points of morale, some attack rate boost for range and melee units, so I don't think it needs to be fixed. It's quite useful. Then moving on to Lu Zhi, we have a cost of 1350 going back to 900, White Elite going to Black Elite, Sovereign of the Blade going to Celestial Sword, and attack rate fixed to 0%, Turning the Tide. Very interesting ability that activates when you have enemy units routing, giving you sort of a win more option, or perhaps a target the enemy's weakest link option that gives all your nearby units at 100 meter range, which is also quite far. A nice 25% boost to all damage type and 10 points of additional morale. So very nice ability, no need to change this. Then moving on to Tong, who is one of the 4 universal bans in our tournaments, mainly because his unique ability from the Ashes is too strong. We'll see a cost increase going from 750 to 1200 because I deem him as a strong character, so a little higher than the average 900 cost. We'll see the attack modification going to 0%, armor going to 20. and how we plan to fix from the ashes. Now, first we're going to talk about why it's strong. And it comes in multiple parts. It's a healing ability that uses 25% of Pang Tong's health to heal his other 2 generals at an infinite effective range. So you can essentially hide him and heal your other 2 generals, which will be an 8.2k heal over 10 seconds. And what's more broken here is that during those 10 seconds, you're also invincible, which means your other 2 generals will not take any damage as they heal back. All these are too strong. So how we fix this while retaining the healing type is we change the duration of this active buff to only 1 second so that you get only 1 second of invincibility, but you do get a quicker burst heal, which means we have to lower the heal amount to 5k, which is how much Pang Tong have to sacrifice to activate this ability. So I feel like it's fair in terms of health transplant, and it's given to 2 different generals, so you're getting value there for a multiplier effect. But we don't want to do it at infinite range. We want our strategists to stick close to their fellow generals and troops to keep them safe, making them a useful choice only at close range where they can be targeted. So the effect range here is going to go down to 50 meters, and the cooldown is going to go down to 60 seconds because of these changes. So you can use Pang Tong multiple times much quicker, but you're also killing him much faster for a lot less rewards. So I feel like he's playable now and quite iconic. Bad roster of units, but perhaps you just want to use your 2 other generals to their fullest, which is why this ability will be quite good for that. Then looking at Shi Xie, we have the cost going down from 1500 to 900, horse going from white elite to black elite, armor going back to 20%, base charge bonus dropping from 116 to 26, and his unique ability of turning the tide doesn't need to be changed as we have addressed before with Lu Zhi. Then moving on to Sima Yi, who is another one of our universal ban characters. Now his cost is going to drop from 1665 to just 900 because I don't think he's going to be super powerful after the changes. His base attack rate is going to go to 0%, armor 20 points, and Whitewater, the ability that's in question, that is supposed to shut down all other active abilities on the enemy side with the plus 5 second cooldown added every 5 seconds at infinite range, is going to see a couple changes. It's still going to be a special ability as we're going to give it an effective range of 75 meters, which is much higher than Stifling Deluge. But at least at this distance, the enemy have many options at countering him, as his many enable conditions include not being under fire, morale is not broken, not hidden, and no enemy in range. Now, of course, since we're dropping his range to only 75 meters, we have to remove no enemy in range, or else he can never use this ability. So that condition is going to get removed. But the fact that you can shoot him with a crossbow or even an archer to shut this ability down is actually quite nice and gives you plenty of counterplay room to make him not overly powerful, which is why his cost is only 900 instead of 1200. Which we already seen a couple times on certain strong strategists such as Fa Zheng and Pang Tong, who has inescapable damage or guaranteed healing. Then moving on to our 8 princes, we have Sima Ying, cost increase from 750 to 900, attack change to 0%. He has the Urson Rampart passive bonus that's typically a standard fixture for champions in campaigns, but in custom battle, he's one of the few generals with this, so I'm going to consider this his unique ability. Now, pretty much similar to what we did for the Sentinel ability of Advent Resolve, where we added a Charge Reflection to a Sentinel ability that gave the complete combination of Charge Reflect and Charge Negation to units being buffed by both under the command of the Sentinel. Here, because this is sort of a champion ability, I decided to give it Charge Negation to complete the set in the other sense. Essentially, I want to make frontline units more resilient to things like elephant charges and cavalry charges, even general charges, which is why I want to add these Charge Negation and Charge Reflection where I can to make them more complete for the units on the front lines here. Then moving on to Tao Qian, we have a cost increase from 675 to 900. Attack rate goes to 0%, armor at 20 points. Now, arguably, Tao Qian is quite weak, and dropping his cost to 600 might make sense given he has bad units. But in essence, most strategists are going to be equipped with some standard stock unit, like, say, crossbowmen for the most part. So I don't feel like it's necessary to punish him for a bad roster of unique units. And he does have the standard 3 abilities, which I deem quite strong. So I think 900 cost is probably fair here. And even though you might never recruit Tao Qian because he's just so average as a typical strategist, and there are better options since Rong is very similar with a better unique unit, I still feel like it doesn't make sense to drop him to 600. And even if I do drop him to 600, I don't think anyone's still going to pick him. So might as well just keep it consistent and keep him a 900 cost. Then we have Xiao Qiao, which is going to be quite interesting. First off, DLC cost shift from 1500 to 900, white elite to black elite. And then we have the unique ability of the Qiao sister, which currently requires you to have both Da Qiao and Xiao Qiao on the same team, and then all your units within 5,000 meters, which is pretty much every unit on the map, are going to get plus 10 points of morale and immune to terror, so sort of defensive bonuses. It feels so weak for you to pick both of these characters on the team, especially with pick ban phases in our tournaments. So for most of these abilities that require 2 characters, I want them to be extra strong to incentivize the opponent to ban the other option, or if they don't, be ready to face the consequences. And here we're going to have plus 25 point morale, 25% melee evasion, 25% range block chance, immune to scare, immune to terror, and fatigue immunity for all your friendly units in range of this ability, should you have both Da Qiao and Xiao Qiao on the field. So with this buff, this should give the Qiao sisters ability quite a hefty weight in some strategies, and also encourages some bans against these choices, which ultimately will open up other choices as well. And then we have Xun Yu, who is built quite weird as sort of a strategist here. First, we have white elite to black elite, sovereign of the blade to celestial sword, health goes from 25k to 20k, evasion drops from 28% base to 16% base, attack rate drops from 40% bonus to 0% bonus, base charge rate goes from 116 to 26, and armor goes up from 15 to 20. And of course, he has one of those ancient wisdom abilities which will get shifted to foresight. Then we have Xun Yu, who doesn't need many changes, just a shift in cost from 675 to 900, sovereign of the blades to celestial sword, and the attack rate shift to 0%. Then we have Zhang Hong, who has another one of those paired abilities. First, his cost is going to go down from 1500 to 900, brown elite to black elite, armor going up to 20 points. And the 2 Zhang abilities currently is infinite range or 5000 range, which is pretty much infinite range, infinite duration ability that boosts range damage by just 20%. Not very useful. So if you have the 2 Zhang's ability, it's now going to be 100% ranged base damage, 100% range armor piercing damage, and 100% range firing rate, giving you some interesting range focused army composition abilities, which once again require you to select both generals, which is much harder to do with pick bans, and also very disadvantaged with 2 of your 3 generals being strategists, since they are quite weak in terms of combat. And should the enemy kill off one of your 2 generals, you'll lose this bonus. So definitely need to be a lot stronger to make it worth it here, which is why you see the 100% damage boost and 100% firing rate boost here on this ability. And that applies to Zhang Zhao, the other half of the 2 Zhang as well. We have the cost shift from 1500 to 900, gray elite to black elite, armor going up to 20, and the same changes for the 2 Zhang's ability here. And then we have Zhou Yu, who is going to see a cost increase from 825 to 1500 because it's 900 base plus 600. So that's going to put him at 1500. Now, Xun Yu previously didn't see a cost change because his default cost is 1500. So that makes both of them the 1500 cost strategists, since both of them are unbreakable. Joey's going to see his health dip from 40k to 20k, his Sovereign the Blade goes to Celestial Sword, and his base attack rate actually goes up to 0%. He has the highest armor percentage out of all the strategists at 45% because his armor is not a robe. That's going to be the one combat advantage he has here. And his ripples of perspective is going to be changed to foresight because it's just unnecessarily weaker for some reason. And lastly, we have Zhuge Liang, who's going to see his base cost go from 600 to 900, attack rate goes to 0%, armor goes to 20. He has 2 unique abilities, starting with Sight of the Dragon, which is a weaker version of Foresight. It's just going to get changed to Foresight as a passive ability instead of active 1-use 3-minute ability here. Then we have Way of the Wind, which is sort of a range buff active ability for sort of all your range units for 60 seconds with 120-second cooldown. It's quite a nice ability even as it stands, but I want to make it more specialized to Zhuge Liang, who obviously specialized in repeating crossbowmen since it's named after him, Zhuge Liang. So instead of providing armor piercing damage here, as those repeating crossbowmen do not have armor piercing damage, we're going to shift all the damage bonus to 100% base and also increase the firing rate by 100%. So now for all your repeating crossbowmen, you're going to see a doubling of their damage and much faster attack rate, which should make them quite strong actually, and make Zhuge Liang sort of specialized for that one unit type, which is what we want to see. And with that, we have covered all our planned changes for the Strategist class. Hopefully you all like what you see, and remember to like the video to help out the channel, and also subscribe so we can hit that 30k subscriber milestone faster, which will trigger the start of our next subscriber game tournament. If there are any changes you disagree with or additional changes that you want to propose for the Strategist class, feel free to drop them in the comment section below. And I'll see you all next week for the Dev Diary on the Vanguard class. So until then, bye!